Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar on managing risks in uncertain times. This is one of our Voice of the Industry webinars from Dodge Construction Network, and hopefully everyone who's attending is familiar with Dodge Construction Network, but just in case you're not, we harness data analytics and industry connections to be the leading source of insights and opportunities. My name's Donna Laquadera Carr. I'm the Industry Insights Director, and as part of Dodge Construction Network, but specifically Dodge Construction Central. But you can see that Dodge Construction Network includes Blue Book, Suites, IMS, Principia. We really offer a full solution for the entire industry. As I mentioned, I am the Industry Insights Research Director. I've also been the managing editor of the Smart Market Report series since 2010. I have joined Dodge, though, in 1988, been around a while. And when I say the Smart Market Report series, what I'm referring to is the entire set of market research that we do on critical trends in the construction industry. We look at everything from technology to sustainability to things that improve people's businesses. And honestly, the most important part of this slide is that website at the bottom. I'm going to be referencing a lot of different research that we've conducted in this webinar today. And you'll see a lot of different report covers appear on different slides. All of those report covers represent reports that you can find on that construction.com/resources website. And I really encourage you to go and track down more information on a lot of this critical information, especially since all of that information is available for free download. All right, so our topic today is managing uncertainty. And before we dive in to how you can manage it, I want to talk about a little bit about what some recent research we conducted in the third quarter of this year reveals about how contractors are struggling with uncertainty. So to give a little bit of context to the findings in the third quarter of this year, I'm going to go all the way back to Q4 2019. We, at that point, were asking a question on a pretty regular basis to commercial contractors to find out how confident they were that the market was able to provide them sufficient new business in the next year. As you can see, confidence was really high. 72% said that they were quite confident in having a strong market. We asked a similar question to civil contractors in Q4 2022. And again, we saw 72% said, yes, the market really can provide me with sufficient new business. That made sense, even though we were dealing with the pandemic at that time. Of course, we had the infrastructure bill recently passed, and there was a lot of optimism. Let's move to Q3 2025, though, and things change. We see a significant decline in the share of contractors who are confident about their ability of the market to provide them with new business. A 15-point decline. And just to give you some context for that, when we were surveying the commercial contractors during the pandemic in late 2020, early 2021, we saw this percentage decline to about 53 to 55%. So 57% means a high degree of concern. Interestingly, though, that concern is not universal. Contractors in the Midwest are actually pretty much as confident as those in the past. Where we really see a high level of concern is in the Northeast and the West, but even the South, although it's below the overall average, is significantly below the levels of confidence we saw reported in previous studies. So what is that based on? Where is it coming from? Well, is it grounded in the fact that there's less work coming out? Dodge's Momentum Index suggests otherwise. Hopefully, most of you, again, are familiar with the Momentum Index that our economists put together. It is true that the most recent month's findings saw a slight decline, But overall, you can see the trend has been pretty positive throughout 2024 and 2025. So there certainly is a lot of work in the pipeline. In addition to that, our economists are not seeing a particularly difficult forecast coming up in the next year or so. Non-residential building and residential building are both actually anticipated to grow, not by a lot, but by a little bit. And non-building construction, while declining a little bit, is significantly expected to be above the levels in 2024. So again, it looks like things overall look pretty positive. So where is that level of concern coming from? Well, certainly our economists see that it is not confined just to contractors. One of the things they've been tracking for several years now is the lag between when projects enter the Dodge system in planning and then how long it takes them to move into the start stage, to actually break ground. You can see that, in fact, in 2025, several sectors, healthcare, warehouses, manufacturing, transportation, multifamily, have had really long lags compared to what we've seen traditionally and even in the last few years. So this does suggest that it isn't just the contractors who are concerned about the marketplace and building in this marketplace, that those who authorize projects, really the owners, are also holding back a little bit, not pushing projects through quickly from planning to start. Another sign that contractors are feeling very conservative is that their investments in equipment are down considerably compared to previous studies that we've done. Again, we did ask this question in slightly different ways for some of these audiences, but overall, the share who said that they are planning to spend more on construction equipment in the next 6 months used to be around half. Now it's just a little bit over a quarter, a pretty huge decline. Again, suggesting that contractors are getting very conservative about where they think the business is going. And what do they think is going to cause a negative impact on their business in the next year? We see skilled labor availability still a huge issue, as it's been pretty much since we started tracking it as an issue in 2017. We see supply chain related delays and shortages still very dramatically selected by contractors. Most of them are very concerned and expect them to actually have a negative impact on their business. But where we see the biggest negative impact is tariffs, and inflation is also another key one. And I think those larger factors are not about their businesses themselves, and I'll explain why I'm saying that in the next few slides, but really about what they think is going on with the demand for construction projects in general in the industry. That they're worried about the macroeconomic instability that they're seeing. They just don't feel like there's a steady enough economic picture to feel confident about where they're going in the next year. And why do I think that? Well, one of the things is that, yes, they're still very concerned about skilled workers, but in fact, we see the degree of those who are moderately to highly finding it difficult to find skilled workers. We see that decline considerably from the previous two eras that we're comparing our most recent findings to. So I do want to point out that 60% of contractors having trouble finding workers is still a serious issue. It isn't, I'm not saying that this problem has gone away, but I am saying that it really looks like it's not as stark as it was for the commercial contractors in 2019 or the civil contractors in 2022. We still see those who report that they are experiencing this challenge, still saying very similar findings to what we found in the past, that most of them are putting in higher bids, that a high percentage of them are going to find it difficult to meet their schedule requirements due to these labor shortages. And most importantly, we still see just under half saying they're turning down new work opportunities. And this is a combination of general and trade contractors. So it has a big implication on the construction industry in general and how much work can be conducted. But when we look at specific challenges related to workforce, anything from their concerns about worker skill levels, to their concerns about the cost to employ workers, to worker willingness to stay with the company, we see that the findings actually show that those who say that they are moderately to highly concerned about these challenges have declined just since the end of last year. Those light colored bars represent Q4 2024, the end of last year. Now, in the middle of this year, they are a little bit less concerned about all of these worker issues. In addition to that, when we look at the supply chain, remember that was also one of their top concerns. Well, when we asked them specifically about the impact of the fluctuations of the cost of construction materials on their projects and their businesses, back in Q4 2019, only 22% of the commercial contractors reported that they saw a really high impact from this. Of course, when the supply chain really struggled right after the pandemic in 2022 and 2023, we saw the share dramatically increase in those who were concerned about that, to the point where in Q1 2023, over 2/3 of the civil contractors said, yes, this is having a major impact on my business. Where do we stand now? Well, currently, when we look at that combination of commercial and civil contractors, it's 33% who say that they're experiencing a high impact, certainly significantly above the levels in 2019, but also dramatically less than when it was a serious issue in 2023. So what we're seeing is something that I think we've seen a lot of support for in other findings that we've had with other studies, which is that while things have gotten better and steadier, there's still an issue with supply chain. Supply chain is still impacting projects even at this time. And it's interesting because one of the things we were trying to get at with the study in the third quarter of 2025 was to understand what they've thought about the supply chain and how the supply chain was impacting them. So all of these findings are from the latest study. When we asked them if the supply chain, how efficient the supply chain is, if they agree or disagree that it's highly efficient, you can see that there is actually no agreement across the board. 1/3 say yes, it is highly efficient. 1/3 say no, it is not highly efficient, and 1/3 are like, meh. So when we ask them though, if they think how the number of companies that get involved in the supply chain between the manufacturer and when they purchase the product, the number of companies that get involved makes the materials more expensive. Almost half agree, and very few disagree. So a lot more consensus around the idea that the way the supply chain is set up makes it much more expensive. However, where we see the greatest level of agreement is that they actually like being able to buy things from a local company with many brands rather than buy directly from the manufacturer. 62% support this. So even though they recognize that there is greater expense due to the way the supply chain is structured, they still feel like the overall ability to have that relationship with a distributor and buy directly from them and maybe have a few more options and not be as dependent on one manufacturer is far more important to them than that level of cost. All right, now before we move on to the next section, even though this wasn't covered in the survey that we just did, a whole set of surveys we've been doing for about a decade now with the Lean Construction Institute suggest that there is that one of the challenges that contractors still face is the challenge of delivering projects on time and on budget. that in fact, for typical projects, it is relatively common for them to land up being completed behind schedule and over budget. And even when we asked them to think about the best project they had done in the last 3 years, owners, architects, and contractors all agree that a significant percentage of them agree, between 1/5 and 1/3 pretty much, that these problems still exist on their very best projects. So when we look at what contractors can do to help add more security in, certainly dealing with this core issue of project delivery, of meeting schedule and budget, is one way that contractors really can have a little bit more control internally, which can help with a very chaotic world where there's so many things that are out of their control. So let's talk about some of the means that we found in various studies to address uncertainty. And let's first look at the use of technology. The good news is when it comes to improving budget performance, improving schedule performance, we do see that a pretty high share of contractors think that their use of technology at least has somewhat of a positive impact. BIM, having an integrated platform for budget performance, having estimation and takeoff software, all of these things are selected by a majority of contractors as something that really has helped them improve budget, schedule, etc. However, when it comes to these larger external risks that we've been talking about now, labor, supply chain, most are not finding that their use of software directly impacts those. So how can technology impact workforce shortages? Well, a study we did with Ignite suggests that the one thing that actually seems to move the needle for companies that are doing it is increasing automation to reduce the time needed for tasks. That lowest set of bars there at the bottom. Now, just to be clear, the green bars are the percentage of companies that are actually think they're doing this right now to help minimize workforce risks. And you can see it's not very common. Only 21% of the contractors, and actually this included architects, that we surveyed said that they're actually able to increase automation to reduce time and deal with workforce issues. However, out of that 21%, nearly half say, yes, this isn't just effective, it is highly effective at helping us really deal with the challenge of finding skilled workers. And a more recent study we did with Procore that really quantified the benefits of using project management software suggests a slightly more complicated picture than just using the software. So just to be clear, project management software is one of the most well-established technology tools out there. Studies we've done of contractors, studies we've done of owners suggest it is widely adopted by firms of all sizes. But what we see is that when we asked about a lot of different things, we asked about over 60 different ways that project management software can improve their projects and their businesses. But one of them was an improved buyout process, which goes directly to the supply chain, right? They can procure faster, they have fewer scheduling issues, they can reduce scheduling delays, and secure their materials on time. All of these things were things they noted in the survey that those who said they had an improved buyout process, this is what it amounted to. These were the things that they experienced. However, it isn't just using project management software that helps achieve that. For the contractors and the owners surveyed, the degree to which they engaged in setting up their organization appropriately so that those who are using the software understand more than just the core functions and really have optimized its use through training, through all of the various methods that you can do to make sure that you are keeping up with what your software is capable of and making sure your staff is keeping up with it using constant change management, etc. Those who are really investing in that are experiencing ways to improve their buyout. They are experiencing ways to actually help them manage their supply chain risks. And it's a pretty high percentage, as opposed to those in the moderate adoption level. Less than half say that they really experience these benefits. And those are the ones who are just using the core features and know basically what to do with the software. We see a similar pattern when it comes to project performance. We see that that those who are investing in the use of their software are able to reduce overhead costs, reduce unforeseen project costs, quite frequently increase the number of projects completed on budget and on schedule, and reduce their project delays. And okay, you say, all right, but really, is it a meaningful difference? Yeah, a lot of them are saying they experience this, but are they experiencing it enough to make a difference? Well, those who are really investing in their software do report differences that actually move the needle. We see that the vast majority can reduce their overhead costs and unforeseen project costs by 5% or more. That they're able to increase the number of projects completed on schedule by 20% or more, and those on budget by 20% or more, and that they're able to reduce project delays by 5 days or more. All of these go straight to their ROI on the projects that they're conducting. And what's more important, looking at this question of uncertainty, is it gives them more certainty in the performance of the projects that they're doing. It helps them control what they can control to better manage what they can. All right, so using technology is one way to address uncertainty. And as we've seen, using technology itself isn't really a standalone process. It's part of a larger process. And considering how your company is using technology, then improving existing processes is also another thing that our data suggests. Again, that Procore study, they did find that one of the most significant improvements was in improving the quality of communication and collaboration. And I bring that up because, as you're about to see, we've had significant studies that demonstrate sorry about that. There we go. We've had significant studies that demonstrate that improving the quality of communication and collaboration has a direct impact on project success. Again, I want to refer you back to the lean studies that we've done. These are the studies we've conducted over time, at different times between owners, designers, and contractors. One of the things we found, remember, we always ask them about the typical project and their best project, right? One of the things we found out is that team dynamics, really positive team dynamics, like excellent team chemistry, like all project team members committed to the same goals, like key stakeholders working cohesively to optimize the whole project. All of these are very uncommon on typical projects. Less than 20% say their typical project incorporates these features. On the other hand, their best projects, the best project they've done in the last 3 years, is far, far more likely to incorporate these kind of positive team dynamics. In other words, team dynamics are directly correlated with improving the quality of the projects. We also find that this kind of communication, collaboration, really is something that extends within their companies and outside with their larger project teams. And in fact, on a study we conducted with Liberty Mutual on managing contractor risks, when we asked specifically about what contractors were doing to reduce the risk related to skilled worker shortages, we gave them the 7 options you can see on this chart. The upper bar is the share who are doing most of these. And you can see that, especially for the options on the left, it is pretty common that most of the contractors are engaging in at least some of these activities, at least some of the time. The lower bars are those who said it's somewhat effective to very effective. And I really want you to focus on the darker end of the bar, the very effective part, right? Because if you're engaging in any of these activities, you're going to find them somewhat effective or you'd stop doing them, right? So it's really again, it's that question of what is moving the needle. And what is moving the needle is where a large percentage say they're very effective. And we only see that with one thing, which is building stronger relationships with their key subcontractors. 41% find this a very effective strategy to deploy. Again, it's about those communication, collaboration, and building relationships. Another study that we conducted with Dusty Robotics that looked at the true cost of poor collaboration found that improving coordination has a big impact on making construction projects better. It helps with schedule compliance, helps with cost performance. But in fact, I want to point you to the top factor. Because remember, one of the issues that we've had is those workforce challenges, right? They're having contractors have so many difficulties still finding skilled workers. Well, one of the ways that the industry needs to think about addressing that is by making construction a more appealing place to work, by reducing stress. We know that construction has a big issue with substance abuse. We know it has a big problem with suicide rates, some of the highest in the country. And reducing the level of stress on site would be directly helpful with keeping more people in the industry, making them happier about working there, and actually being able to draw a younger generation. And 90% of those surveyed agreed that if you can improve coordination, it will reduce the level of stress on site. And nearly half say it will be at a high or very high impact on that level of stress. So that is very exciting. Working with the contractors but it's not just working within the project teams in terms of who they're working with, in terms of the trades, etc. It's also working with their clients. That is another way that the Liberty Mutual study on managing contractor risk, this was perhaps the top factor that helped contractors address supply chain risk, is just setting client expectations about supply chain and inflation risk. We saw that increase considerably in the last 5 years, but there's still a pretty large share of contractors who do not do it regularly. It's only about half of general contractors say, yeah, they do this now at about 75% of the time or more. But really, this needs to become a best practice. And why? Because look at the impact that it has on their projects. You're now working with the owner to set up what expectations are on schedule and budget. And suddenly adherence to schedule and budget increases considerably. Over 80% or more see a positive impact on that. And not surprisingly, clients seeing this greater transparency also respond very positively. That 88% who experience a positive impact versus just 3% who report a negative impact is really telling. And perhaps the most interesting is that it reduces the possibility of claims and legal issues. 52% report that it had this kind of transparency with their clients had a positive impact on the possibility of having claims and legal issues versus just 6% to report a negative impact. Going back to the collaboration study, we of course didn't want to just say, oh, it's good to do collaboration, because actually, as that study reveals, everyone recognizes that. We asked the straight out question, does more collaboration improve your projects? And it was nearly universal agreement. But when we say, what are you doing to improve collaboration at your organization, we see that most things, there is no single thing that everyone's doing. And in fact, while most of the contractors are trying to do something, there are a lot of opportunities for contractors to do more. And that's the upper bar, right? That it's between 40 and 59% are doing any of these activities. But I really want to direct your attention to investing in technology to support collaboration and having policies and procedures that are specifically intended to foster collaboration. Those are the ones that are considered the most effective by those using 4 or more of these strategies. And just to explain the percentages, I've been calling your attention to those low percentages on those other slides, but we asked this question a little differently. And those others, it was a rating in terms of effectiveness. So everything could have been high or everything could have been low. In this case, we said, okay, you're doing these 4 activities. What is the single most effective out of the 4 that you use? And or the 4 or more that you use. So that the fact that the 28% of those who say that they have policies and procedures specifically intended to foster collaboration is the most effective thing that they're doing, that is actually a pretty big share. That a quarter of everyone who's doing it says this is really what moves the needle for us. And technology, 20%. But again, note that it's policies and procedures. But that's where everything else comes out of, right? It shows the company commitment. It shows top down, but it allows people to participate bottom up. It is a very important tool to foster collaboration. In addition, I would be remiss in not pointing out that we certainly see those positive team dynamics that I talked about previously correlated to those who use a lot more lean practices. In our studies, we ask about a variety of lean practices, ask if they're engaged in them. And then based on the number of practices they're engaged in, we assign them into high, medium, and low lean intensity categories. You can see that those with a high lean intensity are really frequently experiencing excellent team chemistry and having commitments to the same goals, organizing around those goals. It's far less common for those who are less engaged in lean practices. And if you're saying, well, what are some of these lean practices? Well, certainly the top ones that we found people were engaged in are shown here. Now, I'm not going to take the time out to go through each and every one of these. That would be a very long description. I encourage you all to go to LCI, to go to the report, to get more details about these. But I do want to point out that most of them, if not all of them, actively encourage collaboration across the project team. They are designed so that everyone has a clear understanding and can coordinate better because they all agree to the goals of the project, the schedule on the project. They update the schedule frequently. They meet together. They use visual tools to help make sure everyone is on the same page. These are the things that are being used the most. And these are the things that really are making those differences in terms of those collaborative processes. Finally, we did ask in that study that we just recently conducted in the third quarter, what were some of the most widely, what were they using to manage their supply chain risk? And among those who were using, how effective did they find it? So again, the use bars are on top, they're in the dark gray. And I really want you again to focus on the darker part of the lower bars. So this was going back to that system where they're rating the impact, not saying which one has the most positive one. So we can see that, very few, less than a quarter, find most of these practices very effective, even though most of them are doing them. Where do we see the most effective practice? Among those who are doing it, it's not common to consider modular options, but 40% of those who do this say they found it has a major impact on their ability to manage supply chain risk. And I'm using that as a cue to talk about leaning into the new. This is the third area. And unfortunately, it's a little bit of a challenge as a way to address uncertainty because leaning into the new always involves uncertainty, though. But I still want to make a case to you that there's a few things you need to think about and consider that will hopefully help the industry in the long run address these challenges, these external challenges that we face. One, again, workforce challenge, right? So Dodge invested in a study just on our own to look at workforce challenges at the beginning of this year. And we did this by surveying contractors, but also surveying the potential job force. This included students, those in other jobs who would consider a different role, a different job, and those actively seeking jobs. Only 7% of the students and the job seekers were actively considering a career in construction when we asked them that directly. However, when we asked a later question that revealed how open they are to considering a career in construction, where they ranked it, they rated something on a 5-point scale, those who were either neutral or interested were much higher percentages. And that neutral category, which was the largest percentage, is really where we can move the needle, right? Those who are pretty certain they have no interest in looking for a career in construction, we're probably not going to win them over. But 61% of the students and 57% of the job seekers were either neutral or open to considering a career in construction. So what can we do to get them to join in? Because remember, we don't need 61% and 57%. We just need to move the needle on that 7%, right? So if we can just convince 5, 6, 7% of that gap to move to the other side, we've doubled the pipeline of workers. So there is huge potential here. And one of the things you have to pay attention to is, what are they looking for that construction doesn't provide right now? And right now, the two biggest things, we asked them about 16 different factors that they're using to evaluate to consider careers. Right now, some of the biggest gaps occurred in terms of positive culture and flexible work hours. The contractors tended not to be particularly satisfied with these two categories, but they are very important to our potential workforce. So we have to think about, really get out of thinking of construction as this is just the way it is. If we really want to move the needle, we have to think about ways to make it more appealing, certainly reducing the stress that already exists. It would go a long way towards this and creating a positive culture. But I think we need to think beyond this. And one of the possibilities is industrialized construction as well, to address this workforce challenge. Right now, in North America, it is not actually helping with a workforce challenge, because when we surveyed industrialized construction manufacturers, those modular manufacturers that are out there, most of them recruit construction laborers. And in fact, almost 60% report that over half of their workforce comes from construction. So right now, they're competing for the same workers that the contractors are employing. Why is that? Because right now, we don't have a high percentage of truly industrialized construction manufacturers. We have a lot of off-site manufacturers, those who are building components, modular pieces of buildings, under a roof and at waist height, but are still using manual labor to do so. Only 22% report that they're highly automated. But the potential for automating factory is actually pretty good, much better than the potential for automating a complex job site that differs from one job site to the next. And even when we look at just putting construction under a roof and at waist height, and possibly with slightly more flexible hours, we see productivity gains and we see safety gains. And most importantly, right now, I see manufacturers do not have a great deal of difficulty finding their skilled workers. Only 22% reported that it was a significant problem, compared to 41% of the general and specialty trade contractors. And their overall workers are younger. The average age of their workers, based on this survey that we conducted, was 39. The average age of construction workers, according to the BLS, is 42. They're able to draw younger workers in, and the average age of construction workers just keeps going up because we are not making ourselves appealing enough to the younger generation. Now, I can't help but do a little plug. We have some exciting new research coming out on industrialized construction in 2026. So I hope you all will stay tuned. I'm hoping perhaps we'll get a chance to come back and talk about this topic a little bit more thoroughly in the next year. But right now, we're going to move on to AI. We couldn't really talk about the future of what's going on in the construction industry and what might help with issues with supply chain, with issues with workforce, with the challenges that they're facing, with getting more reliability at their organizations without at least touching on AI. Certainly, we have the exciting news is we do have a new study that we've partnered with CMIC with about the use of AI in construction. That is hopefully going to be coming out. We haven't set the release date yet, but the research is basically done. We're anticipating it to be published shortly, either at the end of this year or the beginning of the next year. So please keep your eyes open for that. I can't share the data in advance with you, but I can share a little bit of what was shared with us by a real thought leader expert in AI. That, AI agents, he mentioned an example about exactly how AI agents can help contractors deal with their issues with labor and better management, resource management of labor, and tracking supply chain and making sure it has less impact on their project. As he says here, an adaptive agent can track a late delivery of steel, update when the crew and tower crane need to be there. The agent AI is going to be able to do that much faster and more effectively than we as humans can do. And again, when it comes to that reliability, making construction a better place to work and being able to deliver projects better and more effectively, 40%, he reports, of the cost of a construction project is reworked, and he thinks AI can help drive that percentage down to 30, 20, or even 10%. And we do see that owners, the contractors' clients are there. They do want to engage more with AI. When we ask them about the specific tools that they're using, which are the 7 tools that we asked about are shown on the right. We asked about the digital tools, and we asked them how many of them thought that those tools currently use AI. Only digital twins had a significant percentage, and very few actually are using digital twins out there. This was out of a relatively small pool of owners. But when it comes to those interested in seeking tools that are augmented with AI in the next 3 years, you can see that the percentages shoot way up, and that most of them want to, at least half of them want to see most of their tools augmented with AI. They're really leaning into this. And if they're leaning into it, they're going to want their supply chain to lean into it. I really do want to emphasize, though, that we conducted this particular survey from November through January of this past year. For almost everything else, I think it's still very, very accurate. Things don't tend to shift that much in the construction industry, except possibly in the use of AI, where I think between January of this year and now, there has already probably been a significant uptick in awareness and just tentative use around the edges, used to do a little task here, a little task there in AI in the industry. So I suspect these numbers would be even higher. And, it's not that AI isn't already deployed in the industry right now. We did work with Motive on a report about AI-based camera systems. This is also available on our website. But again, where does AI help? It helps in providing data that improves processes. It was the coaching and the ability for people to understand the risk better that moves the needle. It isn't the AI, it's what they were doing with it and how they're deploying it. And the folks at EY also shared with us that there are a lot of really interesting use cases for generative AI in the AAC world. I'll let you just take a quick look at that. But I really just, but it really is going to make a difference. Well, it's going to be very interesting in the next few years to see exactly how that plays out. And now I understand that there was at least one question that came in. Could I explain how difficulty finding skilled workers causes higher bids? Yes, absolutely. When they said when we asked them if they are putting in higher bids, they are doing it to cover their risk. The more risk a contractor feels, the more likely they are to increase the price in which they put in to cover that risk. It is the only lever they have to pull when they're really not certain if they're going to have a major issue. So, they have projects cost more because they know they have to absorb a great deal more risk. In addition to that, trade contractors, actually, some of them are less concerned about the skilled labor shortages than the general contractors. And that's partially because they're the ones who are able to charge higher prices because of the fact that they're more in demand. If you have your staff and you're fully staffed, it's really finding the fully staffed trade contractors that's made that a lot more competitive. That will also increase the cost of work. Also, a question came in about the comment that Aaron Roberts made about 40% of the cost of construction is rework. What we mean by rework is literally when work has to be ripped out and redone because, or in the case of design, this covers a whole slew of things, but when work literally has to be redone because there was a lack of coordination, there was a conflict, there was a lack of understanding about the goals that the owner had. There are all kinds of things that cause rework, but rework literally is eliminating rework would go to vastly to improve safety, because there have been studies that contractors themselves have done that have demonstrated that rework creates unsafe conditions, right? Because then you're already behind the 8 ball, you're behind schedule, you're behind budget, you have to just do it quickly, rip it out, get it back in, try to get everything back on schedule. It is rework that perhaps is at the heart of a lot of issues that we see with construction. Another question that's come in is, as collaboration seems to be key, how and what types of contracts and contractual clauses improve the construction execution risk? And what is the evolution that is expected? That's an excellent question. We have seen attempts to make sure that construction contracts can help encourage collaboration. Certainly, there is some evidence that having a traditional design, bid, build approach and using contracts geared towards that can work against collaborating. That said, a good team can get past that. It isn't an insurmountable barrier, but contracts right now are typically set up in the construction industry in ways that reduce the incentive to be fully collaborative. We do see integrated agreements and IFOAs that are used to make sure that all players have equal risk in, and that they all share the risk equally on construction projects. Those have been demonstrated to reduce risk. There's been some academic studies on that have shown that those really go a long ways towards increasing collaboration, but they are not widely adopted in the industry. And we have been looking at those since, I would say, maybe 2014, 2015. And we haven't seen a significant increase in the number of those contracts that are being used. It is, in this instance, I almost think that really we all need to look to the owners. We all need the owners to understand that the challenges, and I'm going to actually close this out and close this out. and stop sharing so that I can see your questions. There we go. Yeah, it's been a big challenge in the industry. All right, we have another question. As automation is capital intensive in investment, is this in this inflationary environment, what is the trend as this might bite the margin a lot? And that's an excellent point. That's one of the challenges that contractors have had from the beginning with innovation. When you have a margin of just 5-7% on a project, it's really hard to take a risk and try to get to the point where you're automating. There is evidence that shows that it can be done very effectively and it has eventual ROI. And a recent study that I saw suggested that most contractors now, very different from when we looked at this in 2019, of a certain size, have innovation, have some staff devoted to innovation. But every organization has to look at their ability to manage this. And I know it's a difficult thing to say. One of the things that we're hoping is that both the technology companies, but especially the other organizations that support the industry out there, are really going to step up to help. I know there are various organizations that really look at technology, try to help guide their members and where the most productive investments are. Certainly, that's what we're trying to do here at Dodge. We're trying to, as we analyze all of these different technologies, we're trying to give you guys insights into where you should, based on your needs and what your company's doing, invest in your company. And I think that is all the questions we have. And I think that may be all the time we have. Before we close, though, I did want to share another quick snapshot of who we are at Dodge Construction Network, especially for those who may be joining us for the first time. That Dodge brings together the industry's most trusted data, research, projects, and planning intelligence. Our ecosystem supports architects, GCs, trades, and manufacturers with insights that help you plan smarter, win more work, and stay ahead of market shifts. If you're interested in learning more about how Dodge can support your goals and would like someone to contact you, please complete the short survey at the end. And thank you again for joining us. And we look forward to seeing you at the next Voice of the Industry session.